a lot of times. And it's not saying that Black women and white women are not friends. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, are white women showing up in spaces, truly advocating, being a voice, and standing up for Black and brown people?
You're listening to Empress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Yeah, yeah. Empress. Join us next time on the next episode of Empress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.empressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.
Hello and welcome to another episode, Empress Conversations with Maggie. Today, my guest is the fabulous Jordan Coleman. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you. So please tell our listening audience how you got started with your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my organization. It was really birthed out of my own struggles and my own issues working in corporate America. Just going through situations of discrimination and not having that opportunity to really move up, even though I was qualified. And so I launched this as just a conversation in the beginning. I wanted to hear if women were facing the same adversities that I was facing. And surely our first event sold out, and women were saying the exact same thing, that they were experiencing racism, they were experiencing discrimination. And so it was launched really out of that, having the experience to go to the National Urban League Conference and just talk and hear from people that are actually working in the trenches. I decided that's where I wanted to be. So that's how we got to a seat at the table at this point.
Fantastic. And your name is so on target because truly you're bringing women to have a seat at the table. So tell us more a little bit about what it is that your organization does.
Absolutely. So our organization is focused on shattering the glass ceiling for women of color. So what we say is we want to help women of color get to the table, stay at the table, have power at the table, and bring other women alike to the table. And so we really hone into how do we help women have those skills, those tools, so that we can be in those leadership roles. And it spans across all sectors. So it's not just corporate spaces, it's even entrepreneurship. Being on the other side, as you know, well, you need funding, you need different things. So you have to be able to leverage those conversations and making sure that we have access to what we need.
That's fantastic. What is the number one thing that you find that your clients or the women that you serve need besides funding?
Yeah, so I would say number one is mental health. It's a barrier. A lot of women don't even believe that they belong at the table. They might already be there, but there's still some sense of blockage that they have to hold this seat, keep their head down, and work in the trenches instead of holistically looking up and saying, you know what, I have power here. I can bring other women here with me. So how do I work in that space? So we really dive into helping women overcome the mental barriers that are limiting them from being at the table.
Do you find that sometimes it's more a confidence issue, or are those mental barriers dealing more with worthiness?
Wow, I think actually both, to be very honest with you. Confidence is a big deal. A lot of women, when you compliment them and you say, like, wow, I see you're doing great things. We actually have an event every year where we honor women. And I had a woman tell me last year, oh, I don't think I need to be recognized. I'm not worthy of being recognized. And if you saw her sheet, you would say, no, she's a doctor. She's absolutely worthy of being recognized. But it's this barrier. And I think it's ingrained, you can go all the way back to slavery times, just that beating and that belittlement of we're not worthy of really being there. We were just lucky enough to get there. And that's not true.
That's absolutely not true. I totally agree with you. You mentioned this event that's held once a year. Talk to us a little bit more about that and how people can get involved.
Absolutely. So we have an event in August. It's on August 25th this year, and it's called Sisterhood at the Conservatory. And so it's a moment where we just come together and we honor women in the community that are doing great things. And so our nominations actually open up on April 1st. We don't handpick, we let the community decide who we're going to honor. And we read through all of the wonderful applications. And it's great because there's so many people that you don't know about, and you get to read their stories and hear about all the great things they're doing. And so we bring that event together. It's beautiful. We bring in a lot of florals, and it sits off into like the woods and off water. And it's just a great way to recognize and honor what women are doing in the community.
That sounds so refreshing, relaxing, and at the same time exciting. I'd love to be a part of that, but unfortunately, I'm in Atlanta and you're in Indiana.
I
So, how
know.
can people who are not within your community participate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're always open to traveling if that is on the agenda. If not, we are talking about some opportunities to stream some things that we do because we are having a lot of women reach out, a lot in Atlanta actually, just wanting to know how they can get involved and wanting to know more about it. So more to come. We're working on it, but it's still in the works.
In other words, watch the space. So, tell
Yes.
us how our listeners and viewers can find you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on our website, which is www.asatindindy.org. And there you could find all of our upcoming events. You can find all of our social media handles. We're on Facebook, Instagram, even on TikTok. So check us out on one of those platforms.
Fantastic, Jordan. We barely scratched the surface, and I think I need to kind of take us back a little bit because in the beginning, you talked about mental health in women, and in this day and age, we truly, society, I believe, truly tries to be more careful around what people are going through mentally, considering everything that happened in 2020 and just overall life. Life is lifing. It
Yeah,
is challenging out here. So, with what you said and touched upon regarding slavery and what people have gone through, just it's a lot to deal with, and the people that you serve. What are some of the ways that you are helping elevate those women who are in need of your services?
absolutely. So we create an event. It's called the Safe Space, and it's truly that. It's a way for us to eliminate all the barriers. You come how you are. There's no judgment, and you come and you connect with other women. And it's just a space where you can say whatever you feel, and there's no judgment. No one's walking away saying anything about anybody. And we just had this event last week, and it was a great way for women to connect with one another. And so we
Mm,
were really able to just hone in and build that connectivity and allow women to be vulnerable in whatever way they want it to be. It's not forced, and it's just a playing ground where women can just come. And so that is one way that I would say we really lean into that space. A lot of our work is mental health focused, I'll be honest, because when after we first started, what we learned is women are hurting.
yeah.
And we have been through a lot. And
Mm,
it's not just, corporate spaces. There's personal things going on. I had a post the other day that I read where it said that not only are we fighting in our jobs, but we're also fighting in the healthcare systems. When we go see a doctor, we have to advocate for ourselves. When we are, our children, the school systems, we're having to advocate for them. There's so many places, and sometimes we just get tired. And so
yeah.
we just need a space where we feel safe and we feel connected. And we have other women that are like, no, that's my story too, girl. Like, yes, let's connect. And so that's what we create. And that's what I'm really, really diving into this year, just making sure women feel safe.
Stop trying to figure it all out by yourself. Let the professionals of Imprint Creations talk to you about ways your website can generate consistent monthly revenue for you so that you can live the life you love. Simply go to mprintcreations.com/contact. Fill out the form and someone will reach out to you within 24 hours.
That is so refreshing. Do you provide childcare when you have those events?
We do
So,
not. It has not presented itself to be a barrier yet, but we have talked about it, especially as we're moving into more of a workshop space and doing some things that might be multiple days. How do we make sure that we eliminate that barrier if it does come up? So, but not right now.
Jordan, this is something that needs to go definitely beyond Indiana because that is an issue, or rather a need that is global. So I wouldn't just keep it to Indiana. You got to figure out a way to make this available to every woman, truly. And even though women are hurting, men are too. And they need
Yeah.
their safe spaces to be able to share without judgment or any of those other things. Let's kind of take it a little bit further back because in our conversation, you started off sharing how you left corporate America. What were some of the biggest challenges that you said, you know what, enough is enough. I know who I am. I know what I bring. I'm out. Peace. Later. Goodbye. And you left.
Yeah. So, It was recognizing my talent. I
Mm,
started in corporate with a degree,
mm,
and I started at the bottom. I worked my way to the top. Well, not to the top, but to where they allowed me to go. But I was qualified to go even further. Even at my time in corporate, I completed my master's degree. I was always learning and refreshing things and staying abreast on things. But I was met with adversity every turn, every way that I went. There were no's. You weren't qualified, or no, we don't want you here. Let's move you here. And I got tired. And not only that, even though the level that I was at, I was still one of the only Black women in the room. And so that bothered me because I was the Black voice. I was the one that had to carry the weight of what everyone else thought. But there
mm.
was really space to open up and bring other women. And although I was advocating for that, no one listened. And so, I fought the good fight for a long time. And I said, you know what? Let's step out of this. Let's create something. And literally, I walked away from my corporate job in 2019, and I didn't look back. I have not worked for corporate since, and I honestly have no desire to go back.
Congratulations, congratulations. You
Thank
know
you.
the old saying that goes, new level, new devils, but not that I'm advocating that, but at some point you just have to say, my mental health, my peace of mind is better than this.
Yeah.
So let's kind of pivot because now you've left corporate and you are starting fresh, blank sheet, and you're like, Jordan, one thing that you mentioned that was very intriguing. Let's talk a little bit, or we can go far down the rabbit hole as you choose. But you mentioned the relationships between white and black women. What are some of those dynamics like? Let's go there for a little. Let's kind of open up that can, and yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. What are some of those?
Oh,
Mhm.
that's an
Yeah.
interesting can to open. So what I would say, let me give my organizational experience. So we wanted to create that space because it really doesn't exist a lot of times. And it's not saying that Black women and white women are not friends. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, are white women showing up in spaces, truly advocating, being a voice, and standing up for Black and brown people? And so I wanted to bridge the gap in that way. And what we discovered when we were doing those events, Black women were really angry and white women were coming, but it was almost unfair because we can't expect those that are allies to carry the weight for all of those who are not. And so we had to really take that step back because there are some white women that want to show up. I've had the opportunity of meeting some amazing white women and being in relationship with them. And so I will never ever say that every white woman is racist. I will never ever perpetuate that because I don't believe that. But I have been in experiences where they don't support me, that they are racist and they have tried to hurt me and tried to oppress me. And so it's that balance of, how do we get those that are in that category that are not being the voice or not being supported? How do we bridge that gap with them to allow them to see us as human, to see us as equal, and to really grow together? Because I do think there's something special when there's a white woman and a Black woman at the table and we're sisters now and we're
Absolutely.
supporting each other. And that's what I want to get to a place of creating, is that you don't look at me as your lesser, or you don't look at me as your adversary, but you look at me and say, she's got my back and I have hers. And how are we going to leverage this together? So that's my space. And it's hard. I do get it because some Black women say, Jordan, that's not going to happen. And then there's some white women, they're like, Jordan, please make it happen. And so again, it's us as Black women healing our trauma because we have those experiences. 9 times out of 10, all of us have had some type of encounter, some type of moment with someone that was not a supporter of who we are or what we do, and it makes it hard. So
It does, it does. But how you handle it and how you maneuver, bringing everybody in and being open to that experience, it's such a blessing. And
yes,
it's so warming to hear because some of my greatest champions back in corporate were white women, and they would champion me to further than I even believed in myself at that time. But it's really interesting sometimes how which way the wind blows. But I'm glad to
yeah,
hear that you're making that space, and that's very warming to hear.
yeah, yeah. It's a hard space, but it's one that we want to work in, but we want to be cautious and be mindful of how we approach it. And we want to make sure that women of color are healed so that we can
Mhm.
see the benefit of connectivity, and also understanding that every one of them, every white woman is not going to be an ally, and that is okay.
It is.
um, and that's just the space that we live in, because they were taught things that were ingrained in them back in slavery times, just like we have ingrainment from in slavery times. And
Mhm.
so, it's a barrier that they themselves will have to work through, but that's not our responsibility to hold.
Well said, Jordan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stop trying to figure it all out by yourself. Let the professionals of Imprint Creations talk to you about ways your website can generate consistent monthly revenue for you so that you can live the life you love. Simply go to mprintcreations.com/contact. Fill out the form and someone will reach out to you within 24 hours.
Okay, now you figured out what you want to do. How did you go about getting funding for your own startup? And, turn around and now you're like, okay, you know what? I can do this for other people too. So let's talk about that transition. What are some of the first things that you did for yourself in order to get your business established?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I am a forever learner. And so I went and I worked for another nonprofit for just about a year. And I went on the development side, fundraising side, because I really wanted to perfect skills that I know I did not have at the time.
Mm,
My background is in my master's in nonprofit leadership. It's a MPA. So I had the technical skills, but not the really hands-on to really understand the funding world. And so during my time there, I was able to work for two phenomenal women. One was the CEO of the organization, and the other one was the VP of development. And
okay.
they spent time just pouring into me, teaching me the landscape of fundraising. And every moment I got, I literally sat at their feet. I got all the information I could. I learned. I didn't push back, even when it was hard. And then from there, I left that job and was able to really scale my nonprofit from that space. And so I write my own grants right now. I'm not afraid to talk to funders. Cultivation is key. And so I'm really big on building relationships. I don't go right into a conversation asking for money, but I really want to see what's the connectivity that we have for one another. I use the term, let's date before we get married. We get married, that's when you give
Absolutely.
me funding. And so
Absolutely.
I just want
Absolutely.
to date for a little bit. And so dating is, it's worked in my favor, honestly, because now I have long-standing people that have been with me. They've seen my growth and now they trust me. And so that those are the comments I'm getting right now. Jordan, we trust the work that you're doing. And so, I tell anybody, if you step into this world, become trustworthy. That's the biggest thing that you can have in fundraising landscape.
Consistency too is that you've been there. You were not a fly by night, so you've been there. Let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the places you made yourself available so that you could date some of these. No, seriously, even though we're using that analogy, but it's so true because sometimes people put themselves in silos and it's really hard to form relationships if you're not engaging those relationships or even to initiate some. So let's talk about how you started that. How were you just going to networking events? What were some of the steps that you took to put yourself out there to make those connections?
Absolutely. And this is a great question because I am actually an introvert by nature. And so I had to think of unique ways that I could let down my guard to be able to make connections. And I'll give this free game tip to anybody that's listening.
All right.
I am really big on wearing unique things. And so if it's a blazer with pearls on it, I had an ombre blazer on one time. And so what I learned is the more unique things that I wear, and I always dress up. So if the event is dressed down, I'm still going to be dressed up. And it allows people to come to me. So what happens is someone will walk up to me and say, hey, I love your glasses, or I love your blazer. I hate to ask, but where did you get it from? And it just naturally, organically starts a conversation. And I also have another thing. I go into all spaces. I try to make 5 connections, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like. I want to have 5 transactions for it to be worth my time. Yes, I go to networking events. Church. There's so many spaces I use as an opportunity to tell my story. And I learned to not be afraid to tell my story and to tell about the work that I'm doing. And sometimes people love it, sometimes people aren't interested. And I've learned to be okay with the no's too. And so I would say just, think about the uniqueness of who you are and how you show up in a space and what connects people to you. And then just set a goal. 5 people for me is it's worthwhile.
Never leave an event, even if you say 5 people and then I can leave. Because if you walk in without a number, without a goal, you'll feel defeated by the time you leave. But somebody else actually said that. Walking into an event, I have a number, I'm going to get 10 phone numbers, 10 connections. I won't leave until I reach that goal. Boom. And it's such a rewarding feeling
It
afterwards when
is.
you've accomplished that. So good for you. And that was free game. Thank you for that. Glasses, some shoes, because women always notice shoes. So
Hmm.
that's really great game there. One of the things that you said is that let's kind of go back here because when you first started getting the relationships, how did you then determine? Because you work with nonprofit and for profit. So most of the time people are either doing one or the other, but you're doing both.
Yeah. So my seat at the table is a nonprofit, and I have a for-profit on addition to that. But right now, I've been laser focused on building the nonprofit because of the community needs and how people are showing up in the response. As far as my cultivation and building relationships, I build relationships with both. So I build relationships with corporations. Obviously, they provide a lot of funding. There's a lot of opportunity for connectivity, and they have the demographic that I serve. So I'm always going in to say, how can I help you? On the nonprofit side, you do have your big foundation. So I cultivate them as well. There's one here that I work very hand in hand with, and they're great supporters of my mission. And so, it's twofold. I feel like those relationships look a little bit different on the nonprofit side because it's how can I support them and then they support me, but it's more give and take from that perspective. But just leaning into both sources is really important because you got to diversify that portfolio. No matter which side you're on, nonprofit or for profit, you want to make sure the portfolio is diverse.
Makes sense. Jordan, give us the cliff notes. So if we're trying to get in with if someone's trying to get in with a large organization, a Coke, a Comcast, or whoever, please don't say get on LinkedIn. And because truly, some people are afraid of LinkedIn. It's just truly frightening. So what would you say in order for someone to get a relationship with someone who works at one of these Fortune 500 companies?
Um, my experience, go to big conferences. So like the National Urban League Conference is a prime example, and I'll keep saying that. I had the opportunity to go 2 years in a row, and you have people that sit at the top in those spaces. And their guards are down a little bit more. They're easy to connect with. And so I think when you tap into spaces like that, it's more organic. Like I said, it's not on LinkedIn, which I'm not opposed to LinkedIn, but it is a barrier, right? Because you don't know if they're going to respond. You don't know what the transaction is going to be like. And they
Yes.
probably get inundated with a lot of that. But if we're in person and they're speaking at one of the sessions, at the end, you can walk up and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you spoke about. I wanted to see if there's an opportunity for us to do a virtual coffee or for us to connect, depending on if you live in the same city or not, and see if that's a space and you cultivate from there. It's not an ask right out the gate, but it's
Mhm.
just I want to build relationship and I want to see if there's any synergy. And more than likely what will happen is you'll have some type of connection. They'll say, oh, okay, will you do this? Let me transfer you and get you connected with this person. And then the thing kind of starts rolling and you kind of get your foot in the door. You can also blindly go on their website and request funding and sponsorships a lot of times, but you're a small fish in a big pond. So it's not a promising thing that they will pick yours out of all of the things that they are giving back to or doing in the community.
Really good information. Those are some really gold nuggets you just shared. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Stop trying to figure it all out by yourself. Let the professionals of Imprint Creations talk to you about ways your website can generate consistent monthly revenue for you so that you can live the life you love. Simply go to mprintcreations.com/contact. Fill out the form and someone will reach out to you within 24 hours.
Jordan, let's circle back to a seat at the table. Talk to us about some of the services you provide the community.
Absolutely. So we talked about the mental health piece, and so that is one element that we do. We also do work in period poverty, and so providing women and teen girls with free feminine hygiene products. In addition to that, we really focus on them being chemical free. So studies have shown the ones like Always that have chemicals in them, they cause PCOS and fibroids and different things like that. So we want to help tackle the issue early on, especially with our teenage girls, by providing something clean to them. And so that is one area of work that we do. We accept donations all year around. We also work with our corporate partners who donate items to us. And so that space, we do youth programming as well. So teenage girls, we really believed and started to look at our statistics and our numbers, especially around crime prevention and pipelines for college and all of that, seeing
Mm,
that young girls, teenage girls, if we help them heal earlier, they'll get to the table faster. And so
mm,
we're working this theory in our mind right now, but I really believe that if we can heal them at the teenage age, once they get to college, they'll be presidents of different organizations and they'll know that they really have a voice. So when they go into a corporate space or entrepreneurship, whatever it is, that they are not limited by beliefs. And so we just dive into those pain points with that. And then again, mental health. So women advocacy, we advocate for women. We are hoping to put our feet into a little spaces to make sure bills are being passed that are protecting women, especially women of color. And
yes.
so just really diving into the holistic form of elevating women and making sure that they truly, truly, truly have a seat at the table.
That's fantastic. I can't let this go, but share some of the brands regarding period poverty that do not have chemicals that people can buy. If they don't have access to you because you're in a different state, what are some of the brands that you recognize that don't have all the chemicals that people can buy for, their sanitary needs?
Yeah, so L brand, they are the number one brand that we buy for our women and girls. They are a great company. I actually use them as well, and I've used them for many years, and they don't have any chemicals in their products. Also, there is Cora. I don't know if you've heard of that, but Cora is another brand that does not have any chemicals. They're a smaller company from my experience. When you see them in the store, they may have like two rows of items versus everyone else has a lot. But they're another great brand. You can buy them on Amazon as well. And then there's another one, Honey Pot. Honey Pot doesn't have any chemicals in them. Um, and I haven't used them, but I know some people love them. And then there's a lot. There's a lot more popping up. I actually just saw, and I cannot remember the name on TikTok. There's a Black-owned company that just started a brand of feminine hygiene products that don't have chemicals in them. So go to TikTok and Google it. You probably can come up with something, but yeah, there's a lot out there.
I hope that really helps someone because you just never know. And some of these other big brands who've been there for forever would be surprised how much chemicals are in there and involved in their product. And when we women use it consistently monthly, that does affect your system
Mhm.
because you're constantly applying it, using it internally, and all these things. But thank you for that resource. That really helps. So hopefully that can help some other women out there and get some products that do not have all those chemicals. So let's circle back to the world of grants and financing and all of this stuff. What is the typical timeline between when you receive a client and they start their application to where they actually get money into the bank?
So it depends on who the funder is, but average timeline I would say is somewhere between 3 to 6 months.
Mm,
So when you apply for a grant, like a seat at the table just applied for a grant in January, and we will get paid out in April, the first installment. So just to kind of give you a timeline of what it looks like, it's it's not quick. So a lot of people think like, oh, I can apply for a grant and I'll get the money in 30 days. Most of the time you do not.
Mm.
There are two grants that A Seat at the Table has applied for, and it's been a whole year and we still have not received funding and we haven't received an update. They're still in the decision-making process. So what I would say is when you apply for grants and your funding, read all the details. Because a lot of times they tell you up front, like applications open on this date, they close on this date, we'll make decisions by this date, and checks will be sent on whatever date. And so just make sure you're clear on what the timeline looks like and make sure the timeline fits the programming or whatever it is that you're trying to do so that you're not creating a bottleneck for yourself. You're not having enough funds to be able to execute, but always work off of at least a 90-day ahead of time. So if I'm applying for something today, I know I'm not going to get it and use it until the summertime. So the programming that I do in the summertime will then receive those funds. So, we call it a grant cycle. Just work your grant cycle. And it's the same even in the corporate space on the other side with your clients, especially business to business. They're going to be a contract and they're not always going to pay out right on the day that you sign. But you would hope that you would put in your contract that you would get at least 30% upfront so that you have something to work with, whether you're paying your staff, paying yourself, or paying for materials. You need to have that money to be able to leverage in your space.
That's really good. One of the things that I was wondering, would it be something, the timeline affect how big the grant you're applying for is, or it doesn't matter if it's got 7 zeros or two?
The bigger the funds, normally the longer it takes. So you are right with that. The more money that you typically are applying for, the more meticulous the process is what I have discovered. And if someone experienced something different, please share with the group so we know, because it will be helpful not to have to wait a long time. But 6 figures and above, definitely, I would say about 6 months.
So, what's next for A Seat at the Table? You've mentioned working with young girls, you help women. What is the next phase of A Seat at the Table? Because you've shattered all kinds of ceilings and now you've got us our own boardroom, our own table. What is next?
Yeah, so a lot of things I would say. One phase is we just launched our cohort. So now we have a group of women that we work very closely with, and really diving into their pain points and seeing how we can help them leverage and really grow in a faster rate. So our cohort has officially launched. We have our first one starting on April 4th. And then from there, we're looking into the co-working space. And so seeing how we can dive into that area and
Mm.
what that looks like. And I would say also expanding. So as we are now expanding our board and we have board members in other states, we're looking at working with other locations. So we've started some partnerships with some universities and hoping to roll some things out, especially in that college space in other states as well. So.
Fantastic. Jordan, one more thing here regarding the spaces that you just mentioned. Jordan, that's really exciting to hear, and I'm really happy that you're really forging forward. One of the things that I was wondering, when you started your organization back in 2018, how did you survive? It's a two-part question. First, how did you survive? Because you were a new organization in 18, then 2020 happened, and now here we are in 24, and we're looking at an election year with all the things that are going on within the economy right now, inflation, things are crazy. Are you still able to get as many grants for people as you were perhaps back in 18? Because now, with everything, I'll use the word tight, being so tight, how are you able to leverage, what your services that you offer to your clients with everyone literally watching their budget line? So, being really kind of making sure that every penny is accounted for.
Yeah. So what I will say is having the pleasure, like I mentioned, working for the two women in the nonprofit sector, they really taught me to keep my pulse to the ground, to really pay attention to the cycles and what's happening in the world. Funding is really based off of the political landscape. I know we like to say that it's not, but it is. When all those things happened around the George Floyd situation, what did you see? You saw a tick up in all of the funding going to social injustice, going
Yes.
to causes for Black and Brown people.
Yes.
All these companies were making their pledges. And so now we're kind of making a turn right now because we're in a political year and understanding whichever way this goes, that funding landscape will change. It's inevitable. And so the pillars will change of what they want to give to and how they're going to give the dollars out. I will say for me, 2020, so when I started, I didn't have a lot of funding. I was self-funded and I was pouring my dollars into the mission because I really believed in it. 2020 happened during the pandemic. We kind of halt because I didn't do a lot of my things online because there's something special about being in the room and feeling the energy and feeling the connectivity. And so we came back out once the world kind of opened back up right after the George Floyd situation. And we started just right back. We hit the ground running. And so from there, we started to see more funding after that situation. I would say after COVID, my funding has definitely obviously increased. But I recognize it's a political year. And so I'm also really looking at the landscape. We actually used to do an event that was to bridge the gap between white women and Black women. And although I still think that's very important, I know right now I have to take it and revamp it because the sensitivity around this political year is going to look really different. And
Yes.
so I'm building some things behind the scenes before we come back out with that event. But I have to keep my pulse to the ground to recognize that things are changing. And what I can give women of color right now is a safe space. That's the most important thing. And so I tell every company, every organization, pay attention to the landscape, pay attention to how people are going to show up, even from a consumer base. My ticket sales for our events, I try to pay attention. I don't want to be too high because inflation is a thing. And so, okay, we don't want to go so high that people can't afford it, but we don't want to go so low that we can't afford our overhead costs. And so really leveraging all of that and paying attention to where we are and making smart, wise choices, it's,
Yes.
it's important.
Very, very important. Well said. Thank you for that. That was very informative. I really do appreciate that. With everything that you have said, what is the number one tip that you would give any businesswoman right now, whether she is in profit or nonprofit for her business? What is the one thing that you would say regarding whether, it's inflation, the climate, with all these environmental factors that are going on? What is that one thing that you say, you know what? If you're doing this, you have to X.
Yeah. So what I would say is be consistent and be trustworthy. I think those are the biggest things right now with the climate of the political changes and all the things happening in the world. Stay consistent to your work because some point someone's going to lift their head up and say, "Oh wow, she was doing the same thing 2 years ago and she's still committed to that work." So
Yeah.
stay on that cycle and don't come off of it even when things change, but be nimble enough to know that you have to have some flexibility so that your funding and everything else does not drop in the midst of the changes.
Fantastic. Very well said. Jordan, tell our listening audience and those that are watching us on YouTube, tell them how they can find you. Please provide all your socials, your website, all that good stuff so that people can get connected to you.
Absolutely. So our website again is www.asatindy.org. And then our Instagram is the @_seat at the table. And then you can find us on Facebook, which is Seat at the Table Indy. And then LinkedIn is also Seat at the Table Indy.
Jordan Coleman, you have been an absolute delight. I thank you for your time today. And to our listening audience who is watching, please like and subscribe our show. Keep supporting us. Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for the wealth of information. And it was a pleasure. Looking forward to connecting with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're listening to Empress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Yeah, yeah. Empress. Join us next time on the next episode of Empress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.empressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.